Loving someone who doesn't love you back the same way isn't just painful, it's disorienting. You wake up one day and realize you've spent months, maybe years, pouring energy into something that was never really there in the way you needed it to be. And the worst part isn't even the rejection. It's the fact that you kept going, kept adjusting, kept telling yourself that if you just showed up better, tried harder, or said the right thing at the right time, something would finally shift. You were doing everything right by your own logic. The problem is the logic was wrong from the start, and nobody told you that. Most of us grew up believing that effort is the answer to everything. You put in the work, you get the result. That's how school works. That's how sports work. That's how jobs work. So when you develop feelings for someone, your brain just runs the same equation. Try harder, get more. And for a while, that belief keeps you going. It feels productive. It feels like you're in control. But at some point, you start noticing that the numbers don't add up. You're putting in a 10 and getting back a 2. And instead of questioning the math, you start thinking you just need to put in a 20. Here's where it gets real. That thing you're doing, over-giving, over-explaining yourself, always being available, always being the one to reach out first, it's not love. Or at least it's not just love. It's anxiety wearing love's clothes. You're trying to control an outcome you have no control over. And every time they respond, every time they give you a crumb of attention, your brain registers it as proof that the strategy is working. It's not. You're just getting better at surviving on less than you actually need. And let's talk about the crumbs thing for a second, because that is one of the most destructive patterns you can fall into at this age. When you're so starved for reciprocity, a slightly longer text feels like a breakthrough. A compliment feels like a confession. Them choosing to hang out with you instead of canceling again feels like progress. You start measuring love in the absence of disappointment rather than in the presence of something real. And that recalibration happens so slowly that you don't notice it's happening until you're already deep in it. There's also this thing that nobody really talks about. The loneliness of being in a one-sided situation. You can be talking to someone every single day, sharing stuff with them, laughing with them, and still feel completely invisible. Because you know, somewhere in the back of your head, that if you stopped trying, they wouldn't come looking. That if you went quiet, there would be silence on their end too. And living with that knowledge while still choosing to stay is one of the most exhausting things a person can do. You're not just dealing with unrequited feelings, you're dealing with the constant performance of pretending everything is fine.
At some point, a lot of people in this situation also start feeling like failures in general, not just in that specific relationship or almost relationship or whatever you want to call it, but in life overall. You start comparing yourself to other people your age who seem to have things figured out, better grades, better social lives, relationships that actually work, and you start asking yourself what's wrong with you specifically. Why does it seem so easy for everyone else? Why can't you just function the way other people do? And that spiral is dangerous because it takes something that was never really about your worth and turns it into evidence that you're fundamentally broken. You're not broken, but you are probably exhausted in a way that goes deeper than just being tired. There's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from spending a long time not being chosen, not just romantically, but in friendships, in classrooms, in family dynamics. It accumulates. And when you're already carrying that weight, adding an unrequited situation on top of it doesn't just hurt, it confirms every bad thing you've been trying not to believe about yourself. That's when it stops being about one person and starts feeling like a verdict on your entire existence. Can we be honest about something uncomfortable? Sometimes the reason we hold on to these situations isn't because we genuinely believe they'll turn around. Sometimes it's because leaving feels like admitting defeat. Like if you walk away, you're confirming that you weren't good enough. But staying doesn't prove anything either. Staying just keeps you stuck in a loop where you're constantly gathering evidence to either justify the hope or justify the hurt, and either way, you're not actually moving. You're just spinning in place and calling it patience. There's also the social anxiety piece that makes all of this so much harder. When you already struggle to communicate with people, when socializing feels like a performance you're never quite prepared for, When you're watching other people seem naturally comfortable in situations that drain you completely, the person who does make you feel understood, even halfway, even inconsistently, becomes disproportionately important. You hold on harder because finding that kind of connection felt rare. And maybe it was rare, but rare doesn't mean right. And the fact that something feels comfortable doesn't mean it's actually good for you. Here's a question worth sitting with. If you removed this person from your life completely, what would be left? Not who would you have, what version of yourself would still be there? Because a lot of people in these situations discover that they've been so focused on maintaining the connection that they've stopped developing everything else. Their friendships got quieter, their own goals got put on hold, their energy got redirected entirely into something that wasn't giving back. And when the situation eventually ends, and it usually does, they're left feeling emptier than they were before, not just because of the loss, but because of everything they let go of along the way. The jealousy part is real too, and it doesn't make you a bad person. Watching other people your age seem to have relationships that are mutual, effortless, and stable when you're in the middle of something that makes you feel invisible, that comparison is going to sting. Especially when you know you have a lot to offer, especially when you're the kind of person who shows up fully and genuinely. But jealousy in those moments isn't really about them. It's your brain trying to tell you that you want something you're not currently getting, and that's information worth listening to instead of dismissing as being dramatic.
At 20, 22, 25, whatever age you're at right now, you probably feel like you're already behind. Like everyone else got the instructions for how to do life, and you're still trying to find the manual. But that feeling isn't evidence that you're failing. It's evidence that you're paying attention while also being hard on yourself in ways that you wouldn't apply to anyone you actually care about. Think about how you'd respond if a friend told you everything you've been telling yourself. You wouldn't agree with any of it. You'd push back. You'd find reasons to challenge every single thing they were using as proof that they didn't deserve good things. Loving someone harder doesn't make them love you back, and this isn't about them being a bad person. Some people genuinely care about you and still can't give you what you need, not because you're lacking something, but because the connection isn't proportional. And not enough is one of the most painful things to accept because it doesn't come with a clear reason. It's not a dramatic ending. It's just this quiet, grinding realization that what you have isn't what you need, and more effort isn't going to change the ratio. The moment you stop performing for someone who didn't ask for a performance is actually a really specific kind of relief. Not immediately. Immediately, it just feels like loss. But over time, there's something that opens up when you stop spending your energy on something that was never going to hold it. You start noticing things about yourself again. You start remembering what you actually like, what actually matters to you, what you were like before you started editing yourself to fit someone else's preferences. That version of you doesn't disappear. It just gets quieter when you're too focused somewhere else. There's a version of self-respect that doesn't look dramatic at all. It doesn't look like a big speech or a confrontation or a carefully crafted final message. Sometimes it just looks like deciding to stop texting first, deciding to stop being available at 2 a.m. for someone who treats you like an option during the day, deciding to put that same energy into literally anything that actually gives something back, a skill, a friendship, your own mental health. It's not a grand gesture, it's just a quiet shift in where you're pointing yourself.
And if you've been struggling with more than just this, if the combination of loneliness, comparison, underperforming in places you used to feel capable, and feeling like you just can't connect with people has started to feel like something heavier, that's worth taking seriously. That's not just a rough patch. That's the kind of weight that tends to get heavier when you try to carry it alone, and lighter when you actually talk to someone about it. Not to fix it immediately, just to say it out loud to someone who isn't going to use it against you. The regrets feel endless at this age because everything is still relatively recent. The things you didn't do, the paths you didn't take, the marks you didn't get, they're still close enough to feel like they define where you're headed. But you're also still in the part of life where most things are actually still movable. The story isn't written. And the version of you that's been trying so hard to be chosen by someone who hasn't committed to choosing you,
that person has a significant amount of capacity that's currently going to waste on the wrong target. You deserve something that doesn't require you to shrink yourself, to swallow your feelings, to pretend you're okay with less than you actually need. Not because you're special in some motivational poster kind of way, but just because basic reciprocity is the minimum standard for any relationship worth being in. The bar isn't high. It's just that you've been standing in a place where even that bar feels too much to ask for. And the answer to that isn't to lower your expectations. The answer is to move to a different place entirely. You can't force someone to love you by loving them harder, and you can't think your way out of feeling like a failure by cataloging everything that went wrong. What you can do, and this is the unglamorous, unsexy, actual answer, is start making one small decision at a time that puts you back in the direction of yourself. Not for anyone else, not to prove something, just because you've been running on empty for long enough, and at some point, the most rational thing you can do is stop giving your best energy to something that was never going to fill you back up.